Evening, everybody. How you doing? Ready for some bad weather coming up? Getting cold? Yeah. So, tonight, this is, first of all I have to do fire escape there, fire escape there. I was here with the Photographic Society on Wednesday and the fire alarms went off. So, we all had to traipse out into the car park. So, you've seen all the things about the upcoming talks. I'm just going to get straight into the business of this evening. This is the first of 3 talks on the topic of recycling of plastics. And I'll tell you the reason that we've gone down this route this year. And that was that my wife one day wheeled out our grey wheelie bin out onto the street. And she came back and she looked at me because she thinks I know everything and said, what actually happens to this stuff? And I have to say, well, do you know something? I'm just not really sure what happens to it. So of course, I did what I usually do. What do you do when there's a question? You go Google it. And what I discovered was it's just much more complicated than you would ever imagine. Kevin, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, a lot more complicated than you'd ever imagine. It's not just the case that they take your wheelie bin full of Marks and Spencer's plastic food wrappers, etc., and chuck it into some big vat somewhere, melt it down and make new plastic out of it. A lot more complicated than that. I found it quite amazing, actually, how much of it is not recycled. I'm sure you're going to talk about all of this. But for me it was a real surprise how little plastic is recycled and how much of it ends up in landfill. And then I read where the landfills are and where the plastic goes and how it used to all go to China and how now 60% of our trash ends up in, or our plastic ends up in Turkey. Yeah? It's an interesting subject. It's not just about, the mechanics of collecting your plastic rubbish and recycling it. It gets tangled up in geopolitics and all sorts of economic policies of various governments around the world. So that's why I thought, well, this is really a subject that covers everything from chemistry through to government policies. That's worth a few talks. And so tonight we're having the first of 3. Now, if I'd really been on the ball, I would have put the 3 talks in logical order. But I wasn't. You just have to work with when people are available. Okay? So tonight we're at the logical order, to me, would have been a lady called Deepa Roy, who is a scientist at Edinburgh University. She does research and development on plastics. I think she's looking at how do you engineer plastic materials to be more recyclable. The second in the talk, Kevin, tonight. He works for a technology transfer company. He actually collaborates with Deepa Roy at Edinburgh University, and he's taking some of her work, and his company take academic work and they kind of use their expertise, access to government funding, etc., to get it into a point where it can be spun off into a commercial enterprise. So it's a business incubator organisation. The third speaker, who's coming in 2 weeks' time, is from the BIN Group. Now, the BIN Group are located not far from here, in Eco Park, and John Ferguson, correct, is their Director of Strategy, and he's going to come along and talk about what's really going on here in Scotland dealing with plastic waste in the future. So tonight, like I said, we've got the second of our talks, which happens to be the first, because of the way things worked out. Okay. And Kevin runs a company called Impact Solutions down in Livingston. He's a chemist by training, But his real skill is managing difficult people. Now, that seems to me to be a really useful skill. And he's applied that to a number of big companies. He'll tell you, I'm sure, all about it. A number of big household name companies. He's managed thousands of staff. And now he's managing a bunch of scientists and boffins down in Livingston. Part of their work is a test laboratory for principally the petrochemicals type industry, and part of their work is this technology transfer, technology incubator stuff. So, Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you. I've probably spoken far too long.
That's if we can get this mic working. Hello?
Yeah, okay. So, over to you. Thanks very much.
Just give me a second. Oh, it worked. Thank you very much for the introduction. As you said it, I work in the plastic industry. My son's actually a taxman, and he gets less grief than I actually do. As soon as you say you work for the plastic industry, that's it. Okay? I was talking earlier and I said I'd actually made it in my career when I started to get hate mail coming through the mail and actually started to get there. What was surprised him is when I responded to it and tried to engage in a conversation. Plastic's not perfect. Hopefully, my idea tonight is trying to make you think about things, think about some of the information is out there, and actually make your own view on a lot of it. Why me? Well, the last count I had 13 jobs. I don't do it very often, but the last time I did it was 13 jobs. The one that pays the salary is Impact. We're a test lab, an R&D centre. We work with most of the places. We actually came out of BP. When BP joined with Solvay, Pharmanius, the R&D boffins were all there and they didn't know what to do with them, so we set up ourselves and did that. And I joined them to try and manage these complicated people. Prior to that, I've worked vast majority of things. I've worked, used to be a general manager of a recycling plant. I've worked with Bupa. I managed 13 care homes. I've worked with Sky TV, worked with Caterpillar. I basically manage technical staff. That's what I do. I mean, they're far brighter than me. They're far more intelligent. What you're trying to do is you try and direct them. You try and give them the guidance of what they actually want. That's what I do. My other companies, Impact Recycling was the first spin out we had. It uses one of our patents. They've currently got 2 plants, one in Bellshill, one down in Durham. The plant in Durham is recycling. I think last week, for the first time, it reached 3 tonnes an hour of plastic going in and coming out, which is, for a UK plant, is actually a decent size. Reventus is, we have agreed Series A funding with one of the large petrochemical companies that is hopefully in within the next couple of weeks. And we have got a pilot plant operating in Livingston which works on kilogram scales. So we're starting to work on raising the finance to get the first commercial plant, which hopefully will be arranged by the Scottish Government, play their cards right, depending where the funding is. Cell mine is still currently at lab scale. It's involved in battery recycling. So basically it's lithium batteries and other zinc batteries. The green revolution, there's a lot of them coming about, but actually recycling these batteries and these cells are actually really difficult and very, very inefficient. So CellMind has got a technology, it's working at lab scale. The whole idea is to bring it up to pilot plant and to bring it up to things. Finally, Scottish sustainable certifications was set up to deal with plastic packaging tax. I'll talk about more about this later. It's failed to do that. We're now working with brand owners trying to actually replace some of the let's grow a tree systems that they've actually got and trying to get a more reliable way of doing it. It's strange when you look back at plastic. Plastic was seen as a miracle material. It's light, strong, flexible. Even had its own superhero, which is it was bizarre when you actually think about it. When you look at the what happened with plastic now, but it was a miracle material. It was a great material when it first came through. Even worked with Batman. But the purpose to tonight is to look at unintended consequences. Believe it or not, plastic bags were actually designed to tackle the problem of deforestation caused by paper bags. You actually read that, it's quite scary, and it's quite sobering when you actually think about it. And how did Sten Gustav actually feel when he saw his invention turning like this? Enough? So, plastics turn to an environmental saviour. Pictures tell so much more. Quite sobering. And there's nothing to do with that plastic. That's there, it's plastic is there. So what went wrong? Next problem is what do we do with it? And this is where we come to plastic recycling. This is where we actually do. What do we do with the plastic? The title of the slide was The Elephant in the Room. Well, it's there, it's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. What do? We burn it. We bury it, or we ban it, or we recycle it. I get a row when I call burning it energy to waste, or sorry, waste to energy. It's not new. It really isn't. It's traditionally it's always been in Scandinavia and Germany. It's always been connected with district heating. That building on the right hand side is a waste to energy plant in Copenhagen, I think it is. And it basically generates electricity and it heats the local population. It deals with low quality waste, and it's got, because of the scrubbers in the stacks, it actually is promoting clean energy. The UK has always been late to embrace waste to energy, but it's catching up very, very fast, and I'll come on to that why. And why is there not more plants? Well, there's better solutions to it in my view than actually just burning it. You've taken so long to actually produce something of real value, this miracle, so you burn it. It's not right. The key outputs also of energy to waste plants is electricity. Well, Scotland's actually very well served by renewable electricity. 97% in 2020, and a lot of the time it's actually exceeds our capacity to use it, and it's exported. So what do you do if you're burning all this waste and you're producing this electricity? Do you turn the windmills off? It's stupid. It's crazy. There's better ways to deal with it. One of the other problems is when you're actually burning RDF. Sorry, plastic's terrible for buzzwords. RDF, refuse-derived fuel. So apologies, it's really, really bad for it. So if I go into it, I'll try and correct it. Is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, as you all know, is one of the main greenhouse gases. So is it a good idea to actually burn a lot of it? No, not really. And you just don't tend to. So I'm not a great fan of waste energy. It can be a solution, but it's not a great solution. Bury it. That's a big, big landfill. In some ways, you bury it, it's going to stay there, it's properly contained, it's not going to go anywhere. But really, there's better ways to do it. And they're already starting to mine landfills for some of the scarce metals and other things like that because it's a cheap way to do it, because in the past they buried it. But I'm not a great fan. Ban it. Drinking straws are a good example. Plastic drinking straws, historically, were always made at polyprop. Polyprop is really recyclable, really valuable. People want PP. As much PP as you can get, you can recycle. So why are they not recycled? Why are they such a problem? Well, recycling is all about cutting things into small bits and then shaking it to put it through screens and then doing something with it. A straw is really narrow and long, so basically it escapes from the system. So you can't recycle it. It just doesn't get recycled because it's just the wrong shape to be recycled. It just doesn't go there. So, yeah, so let's ban it. It's now being replaced by paper straws. Wait a minute. What happened to paper straws? Paper straws have got a plastic liner. Because they don't have a plastic liner, they would just get soggy. So they've got a plastic liner. And what happens to paper straws? Well, they fall through the same bit of screen that used to happen before, and it goes down. Anyway, another thing, I thought it was funny when I searched images for straws. I came up with one on eBay. If they're banned, why can't I buy them on eBay? Anyway, lots of questions. Just ban plastic. Okay? I've got a lot of respect, I've got a lot of time for Surfers Against Sewage and the ones with the water quality. I have a lot of time for that. Just ban plastic, it just doesn't make sense. You look at that picture and it shows how difficult it actually is. The sunglasses, they're all made from plastic. The clothing, almost certainly some artificial clothing in there. Trainers, there's somebody I must have saw wearing leather trousers with their vegan leather, it's PVC. The yellow flag looks awfully shiny, not to be natural. Makeup, paint colours, it's just not feasible to actually do it and continue to survive society by just buying it. A little bit of a laugh. I think that's great. I think that's brilliant. You've got to admire somebody sitting in a meeting saying, I know, we're going to invent this paper bottle. But I know, we'll just get a plastic one covered in paper. Nobody will know. Nobody will know. It's fine. Oh, sorry, I'm too fast. Oh, there's a paper wine bottle. Now, I'm all for wine boxes. During lockdown, they were an absolute godsend because the binman thought I was having parties when I was drinking glass. He really did. So, but the wine boxes were really good. But that's just a posh wine box. And how do you actually, what do you do with it? You've got a foil bag, a plastic lug, a cardboard outer, and a metal lid. How do you recycle that? What bin do you put that in? Bottled water. Yeah, this stuff that falls from the sky. We have lots of water here. You've got It's probably a bio-based LDPE, an aluminium, cardboard with a cap. And it's just a bottle of water. Yes, if you have to use a bottle of water, use a single water and then recycle it. It's not complicated, it's something that is recycled. The one thing about recycling is if it looks like something, it probably is, and they can deal with it. If it isn't what they think it is, it can't. That's totally unrecyclable. That will just go either to energy to waste or to landfill. And in landfill it will just sit there. Or you can actually just lie. This one actually annoys me. The Liquid Death website, their USP is they don't use plastic bottles. They use an aluminium can with a plastic liner in it. Most cans will actually have a plastic liner in it. You need the plastic liner in it to protect it from the acids in the food. So they'll actually have a plastic liner in it. But there's a wee tiny column, if I can read this out. The mark is really aggressive. That little black box there, it's too small to actually see. Plastic is not technically recyclable anymore because it's no longer profitable to recycle. Most recycling facilities simply send plastic to landfill because they would go out of business trying to recycle it. Environmental economists now say it's actually better for the planet. Whoops, sorry. To simply throw your plastic in the trash that requires less trucking to get it into landfill. What's farcical is you can actually buy that in the UK and they send it across an Amazon from the States and they actually fly it across and you can actually buy it in the UK. And it just annoys me. So why do we use it? Well, it's the best. What do you mean by the best? Define the best. I've got 5 possible suggestions here. Ask 5 more people, they will get 5 more definitions of what is the best. Even something is lowest carbon impact. How do you actually... I could get 10 reports saying plastic is the lowest LCA. I could find another 10 it's saying it's the devil's brew. And it's actually trying to understand what information you're actually getting and who's actually producing the information. So, why do we use it? The cucumber is one of the best uses of plastic there actually is. The cucumber extends the shelf life of a cucumber from 3 days to about 15 days. It's massive savings on that little tiny bit of plastic. It's why don't we use glass? Milk bottles are a good example of using glass, but it's something silly like you've got to be recycled 13 to 25 times in order to actually make it cost effective to use. Also, to transition to using glass bottles instead of plastic, there's some study says it would take a third of the UK's total energy consumption. It's just massive. I used to run a glass plant. When I said I worked for a recycler, one of the things I had was I had a recycled glass plant and I used to take clear glass and make cat's eyes. This one plant used as much energy as Paisley. I'm actually serious, and it did actually use that much energy. I run a small 30,000 square feet lab. My electricity bill is 30,000 a month. That's what my electricity bill is, and it's you work out what this is. It's just massively energy. One of the farcical things is, according to the UN, sand is no longer sustainable because we're using sand faster it's produced. I like that. I thought that was really funny. And just, I've worked in Saudi a lot, and they've got a lot of sand. They have got a real lot of sand. Wikipedia cites the origin is unclear, but Mark Twain attributes to Benjamin Disraeli, and it's so true. It is so true. Trying to actually understand what is the correct route to take is so difficult. You'll see through the presentation some of the examples I've used. It's trying to find the information, trying to find current information. It's a lot of it is so hidden in trying to find it. One of the actual, I work quite close to is BPF, and I remember being at dinner with them, and they admitted they're fighting a losing battle. They cannot reply fast enough to all the comments, because when they reply, they've got to reply with facts, with science and everything else that needs to go through. So if somebody says something, plastic's bad, they've got to reply, well, plastic's really good because of this, because of that. You can't do it. You've got thousands of people saying plastic's really bad, and you've got a few people saying, no, that's not true, that's not true. And trying to actually rebut some of that information is really hard. They can't defend themselves. And also statistics. Technically, only 9% of plastic is recycled. That statistic is actually true. But you look at Bakelite when it was first built, when it was first made. The thermoset, you can't recycle it. There's nothing you can do with it. It's a solid thing. You don't really make Bakelite anymore, but it's pipes, for example, are all made of HDPE. They're designed to last 100 years in a lot of cases. So why would you recycle them? So it's statistics taken out of context and actually trying to understand what people are actually saying. We're going to come back to some of these graphs before. When you actually look at the graphs, you look, the landfill rate is falling, but the recycling rate is rising. We'll come back to some of them. You said about Turkey, my data I'm using 2020. UK is a developed country. We say developed. So look at them, look at these countries. Netherlands, more likely it'll be a port. Germany was likely to be energy from waste. Poland's probably likely to be energy from waste. Turkey has got quite a big plastic infrastructure, but there's no way they're going to use 27% of the UK's exports. I actually did, a long time ago when we were setting up impact recycling, we did a freedom of information request to Zero Waste Scotland asking what happened to Scotland's export. And Scotland's biggest exporter was a port in the northeast. Okay. You've just got to question that. One of the, you mentioned China. Long time ago, virtually all the waste plastic used to be shipped to China. China just said, no, don't want it anymore. And it took under 3 months for companies to relocate themselves out of China onto another country and actually reset that back up. So they just changed the operation from China to another country. And they're now just playing a game, and it's just chasing countries around. One country who doesn't want the waste goes to another country. One country wants another one, and they can just move the thing. It's all down to labour. It's all down to that. But so, external drivers. One of the big ones is government policies. So the government policies can direct what's happening, but also brand marketing. You look at some of the snippets you've got there. Lego wants to solve the world's plastic problem with material that can survive generations of play. It's Lego bricks, it's a toy. How is that going to solve the world's plastic problem? Or you've got, hello, I'm made from plants. Well, you may be made from plants, but you're still polyethylene by the looks of it, because what they've done is they've made it from a bioplastic. The Coke as well, it's made, the brass can polyethylene, it's made from there, which is made from sugar beet. So it is made from plants, but it's still chemically is identical to a polyethylene made from oil. Absolutely no difference, but it is made from plants. At the top is the Pringle tub. Pringle tub is one, always say, if you ever want to Google how do you recycle a Pringle tub, there's actually YouTube videos on how you recycle it. You've got a cardboard tube with an aluminium foil liner, a foil cap, an aluminium bottom and a plastic lid. It's like, what bin do you put that in? Do you split it up and put it into 15 different bins? Or what do you do with it? It's always a favourite one, the Pringle one. Oh, that's my son. Doesn't look quite like that, but yeah, taxman. Plastic packaging tax. Sounds good. Really good. Let's get people to encourage them to actually use recycled plastic in their product. Let's do that. And if they don't do it, we'll tax you. Great. And if it doesn't contain 30% plastic, we'll charge you £200 a ton. That's where it is. As a lab, we set up SCG to actually do this monitoring and actually do that. I have done one test for one customer because I can tell if a material, if a certain material contains 30% plastic or not. But that's it. It's only one material. What's actually happened? HMRC raised 276 million, 20% above expectations. People are paying the tax. Sorry, when I say people, I mean everybody in the room are paying the tax. That's what's happening. It's not high enough for people, for the manufacturers to put up with the efficiency loss to actually do it. They're actually charging us more to pay the tax. There's little or no enforcement, basically because you can't actually tell. That's the honest truth. Unless it is clear packed, there is no standard to actually tell that it contains 30% recycled plastic. I can tell if it's recycled, it contains recycled product, but I can't tell whether it contains 1% or 80% because you just can't do it. So they've introduced a standard that you can't enforce. The whole idea was meant to be done. It's just, you cannot make it up. I've tested some of the stuff in supermarkets that are claiming it's fully recycled. I can tell from the melt, it's not, it's virgin. It's pure virgin material. And I can tell, you go back to the supermarkets will say that it is, they've been assured by their supplier it's using recycled plastic. Nobody's interested. And they sell it as that. Basically, £200 a tonne is not high enough to offset the efficiency loss, and it's us it's paying. What happens? Viridor set up the UK's largest plastic recycling plant in Avonmouth. And on the 5th of November, so nice and recent, they announced they're going to close it because they cannot get the funding from the plastic tax to sell the material. But on the 6th, they've agreed they've got the funding to burn it. So they're going to burn the material that should be collected. You can't make it up, can you? You really can't. Why is this? The PRN system is probably the single most important factor in plastic recycling. It's a government policy that is, and up to this point, it's been the most important point. Manufacturers have to pay, or producers of packaging material need to pay a fixed cost based on the thing. But it's not just plastic, it's pallets, everything else. And it does go up and down. My expertise is plastic, so how do we look at the aluminium? Apparently aluminium used to trend at well over £200 a tonne. It dropped down to there because of overproduction and change of suppliers. But it's a huge amount of variation. Manufacturers hate it, and especially for plastic. If you look at 22, that's a red one. You look at the low, average and high. The high was at the end of the year when everybody had to buy plastic PRNs to be compliant, and there wasn't enough of them going about because the recyclers got clever and said, no, we're not selling them just now. will wait for the price to go, so they have to buy some. So yeah, they hate it. Absolutely, manufacturers hate it because of the volatility. They have teams dedicated just to buy the PRNs because it's such a big thing for them. One of the issues is they then look at ways to avoid it. One of the ways to avoid it is they start investing in recyclers. I'm not complaining. They actually invested in, Nestle actually invested in impact recycling, I think it was 6 million. It allowed us to build one of the plants down Newcastle, so they're running with that. They also put a lot of money into recycling in Glenrosses. It's actually gone bust, but that's another story. But the theory was good. They'll actually take things and they'll forward buy the PRNs. Being driven by the government tax. And the government tax PRNs is what's driving the economy. One of the issues you have is manufacturers will try and avoid tax. It's a tax. Nobody likes paying tax, apart from my son, but he's just weird. Nobody likes paying tax, and they'll always look for ways to avoid paying it. So they'll lightweight something. They'll pick something that used to be there. How can we make it thinner? How can we make it lighter? How can we do other things to it? One of the other problems is, and this is what drives the export to China, if they ship it abroad, they get an EPRN. An EPRN is worth the same financial value as a PRN, but it's an export one. The problem is, when you do it in the UK, it has to be end of life, i.e. it's suitable for reuse. When you ship it abroad, it has all the dirt and everything else, so it's probably worth about 30% more than a UK PRN. So the UK government is actually telling all the recyclers to ship it abroad. It's ludicrous. And that's what drives a lot of the problems with all this waste and things like that. And that's why there's a difficulty getting investment into the recycling industry, because it's better to actually ship it abroad. When you look at, it's a really old data, but I couldn't find anything newer. The one in red is plastic packaging recycling up to 2011. Guess what? It's flat. It doesn't rise. You look at the plastic recycling thing, it shoots up. It's exports. They're shipping the stuff across abroad and actually processing it, not in the UK, because it's the PRN that's actually driving it. We're no longer in the EU. There was something called Brexit. We're actually one of the few countries anywhere in the world that cannot influence their own standards. Every other country, they've got an influence in standards. The UK introduced the UKCA mark. We'd not done a single test in that. It's just not going to happen. It's virtually a dead dog. It's causing real issue with greenfields because it's all down to standards, it's all down to that there. But the EU have put this in. Still important for us to actually take aware of it, because manufacturers develop a product for a region, and the region includes Europe, so it tends to all be the same. It doesn't matter, so it's there. But they've got the fee of £800 a tonne, or €80 a tonne, 80 euros, I think. So, sorry, I forgot where I am. One of the important things is it's actually paid by the state rather than paid by the individuals. It's not a surprise, it's not particularly working very well. It's, bit chaotic. UK's response to that is the extended producer responsibility. Sounds really grand, but it's been delayed many times. It's currently planned to come in next year and replace the PRNs. I'm not convinced it is. One of the problems they've got is they've actually reduced the targets, so the chances are of it actually working is pretty slim. DRS. Don't want to be political, but it works. DRS scheme works. It was abandoned in Scotland before, but it does work. What's actually quite funny about it is, in plastic, the plastic producers are actually quite pro it, because the pop bottles, they would get a supply of good, clean material, so they were actually quite pro the DRS scheme. It all came down to glass, and eventually the UK government said no, yet Wales were originally going to include glass in their DRS, but it seems to have got a deal with when Labour came into power, and it seems to be sort of self out. But the argument is it does work. It's probably too small, but there's some big numbers there. Germany is 98% return, Finland's 97%, compared to the UK's 59%. It does work. Things like bottles. Everybody knows what a bottle looks like. If it's a bottle, it has value, so people pick it up and they take it back. There's always somebody there. You never see pound coins lying in the ground. So it's exactly the same. If something has value and somebody recognises it, they'll recycle it. Going on to consumer pressure. I remember pot noodles from university. I used to live on pot noodles. I really did. This plastic tub, really good tub, nice and strong, kept the food down, protected it. They're now doing it in a paper pot. Actually, are they doing it in a paper pot? When you actually read it, what actually is it? It's a cardboard and paper packaging, but it has an ultra thin plastic film used to provide barrier protection. Nah, I'm not sure it is a paper pot. And then you've got soft plastic or sachets are not currently recycled. That doesn't feel right to me. I've never ever seen clear cardboard. Never. I've never seen it. I've never seen cardboard that's grease resistant and stuff like that. But it's a plastic free world. How is that material actually recyclable? Look at a bio-based and biodegradable thermoform material. They're doing everything they can to avoid saying plastic. It's polylactic acid, it's PLA, it's made from cornstarch, but it's plastic. It does not compost, it does not home compost. We'll come on to this later. You stick it in the ground in your garden, it will be there in 40 years' time, it will still be there. It doesn't do it. It came from plants, but it is not a plant. It is a plastic. But they'll try anything they can. And how can it be recycled? Technically it can be recycled, but unless they take it back, it's not going to be recycled at any, you put it in your bin. Work out what bin to put that in. Guarantee the person can Ross don't provide a PLA bin. Guaranteeing it. And if you put it into your composting bin, it'll just get straight rejected. Detergent bottles used to be made of really sturdy HDPE. Used to be really sturdy bottles. You've noticed they started coming in pouches, reducing the amount of plastic. Used to be able to recycle the detergent bottles, and detergent bottles are actually quite good because they contain residual soap. So when you're actually processing the plastic, it actually washes at the same time in the recycling plant, because recyclers like water. They like cutting things up and they like using water. So things actually washes at the same time. Part of the problem is 2D is not particularly very well recycled. It's really light, it's really difficult to transport, and it quite often is not one material, it's a combination material. The other thing is a Devil's Brew Tetra Pak milk cartons. The council's take them back. My understanding is all gets shipped across to Scandinavia, and I have seen kitchen units made out of them, but I assure you we drink a lot more milk than there is kitchen units. And work out how do you separate that? What do you do with it? This is your comment about recycling. Who does the bulk of the recycling? It's us, in our bins. And my mum got a new bin. She lived in Kinross, and she got a new bin with a thing that changed the blue bin from a blue bin to some other kind of bin. I live in Edinburgh, so I've got a different colour of bins, but that's a whole different other story. And we do the bulk of the recycling. Yet we're probably the least technically incompetent people in there for actually deciding which bin they actually go in. Zero Waste Scotland claim 50% of waste is in the wrong bin. Does that surprise anybody? No, not really. And I think a lot of that is wish recycling. People want to recycle something and they want to try and do it. But it's not that. It's like pizza boxes. What on earth are you going to do with a pizza box? It's waste. It's contaminated. It's waste. Do not put it in the cardboard bin. It is junk. It is never ever going to be recycled. How can we prove it? Common coloured bins. Something as simple as that. Make it easy all the way. I believe across Perth and Kinross there's different collection strategies. So in different parts of Perth you actually have different bins there. The more remote areas don't have as many collections. Mum still doesn't have a glass bin. Let's just make it simple. It's not hard. But never mind, plastic's all the same, isn't it? It's all exactly the same. Apologies, that's actually an American one because it's got a V for vinyl rather than PVC. We've all seen them at the bottom of the any plastic container. We've all seen them what they are. They're very dated, kind of must confess, but that's the problem with standards. Standards go out of date as soon as they're built because it takes so long to actually make, so as soon as you make them, they go out of date. The best, we aside, I'm a test lab, so we get people coming to us for testing, and we got a manufacturer, Bollards, coming to us for testing and to this BS standard, so we got a copy of the standard, and we had to crash it with a Mark 1 Escort, because that's what the standard said. The standard was that old. Has anybody seen the price of a Mark 1 Escort? But yeah. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different plastic types. Hundreds. And what does it matter? They're not similar. They're not the same. They can't be recycled. You'll destroy the properties. And yet, most recycling is actually still done by hand at the first stage. The thing about recycling, it's all about value. You have a household waste, which contains bottles, it contains all cans, it contains all sorts of exciting stuff. So they take that, and they take the cans out, and they take the bottles out, and they sell the cans for this person, they sell the bottles to this person, and then you've got a residual waste which contains stuff. So they sell that stuff to somebody else, and that other person's got this little bit of kit, really fancy bit of kit, said, oh, I know what that is, I'll have some of that. So they take some of that out, and it goes to somewhere else. And the whole idea is to extract value going down the line and avoiding landfill, because landfill is the most expensive part of it. That when you have to put it to landfill, that's it, no value left. You take it there. So it's the very last thing they actually do. The number of plastics is actually the biggest challenge in recycling. I'm very, very quickly going to go through some of the key PET. It's Coke bottles. PET is one of the most valuable, especially clear PET. Clear food grade PET is actually more expensive than virgin PET because it's that much in demand from the people who make bottles and everything else. Lower quality PET will make fleeces. Apparently it takes 25 Coke bottles to actually make a fleece. In my case it's probably 30, maybe 35, but yeah, it's amazing stuff. Very simple to do. HDP, polyethylene, it's the most popular plastic actually produced. These pictures are actually from my plant in Newcastle when I was working down on commissioning. That is 3 days worth of toy cars that came into the plant. 3 days they produced them. And it's quite amazing. The reason they're separate is they've got sturdy axles. And the axles, if you put it through the recycling plant, you damage the plant. So you actually have to dismantle the axles out before you put them through the plant. But that is 3 days worth of stuff coming through. And I thought it was quite interesting. You wouldn't believe the stuff you get coming through the recycling plant. You would honestly wouldn't believe it. I hope nobody would ever recycle the dark side of the moon. I just thought anybody does doing that, that's not speaking to them anymore. PVC is unusual. Is you very seldom use PVC as PVC. It always has something in it. It's like a window, and what you tend to find is windows will be recycled as windows, or pipes will be recycled to pipes because it's a different thing in it, and there's a nice market. Medical is, when you said, plant in Bells Hill was set up, our impact recycling plant in Bells Hill, it's set up purely to recycle medical equipment. That's all predominantly what it's doing. It's 2D medical equipment. Oh, one thing about PVC, because of the chlorine, you didn't want to burn it. Produces HCl, just eats any hydrochloric acid, so it eats any pipe. So when you're looking at energies from waste plants, PVC is, they always ask, what's the PVC content and how high it is. So it's very not good for energy for waste. LDP film. Film is a nightmare to recycle, an absolute nightmare. It has no weight, it's bulky, it goes everywhere, it's often contaminated, it's horrible. It's absolutely fascinating when you actually watch your recycling. One of the big places is BPI down in Dumfries. They recycle a lot of the agricultural film and they actually blow it. They make these sort of tables, which are great, replace timber, and they just sit there, don't need to stain them. They're brilliant for that. But actually blowing bin bags out as well, and actually watching a film blower is fascinating. They're massive machines, and they're literally, it's like one of these blowy stick men, where you got the thing, it's blowing one of them, and it's as tall as probably a 3-4 story building. Fascinating to watch and actually make them. PP. If you Google anywhere on PP, it'll say it's not recycled. It's rubbish. It's American. America seems for some reason not to recycle PP. I have no idea why. It's fantastic material for recycling. For impact, it's the most valuable output it has. These Dulux paint cans, one of their main customers actually goes there and produces there. All the underbody plastic in cars. It's great material. The reason it's so good is you can actually modify it. Just by adding some peroxides, you can make it more runny or less runny, so you can actually modify it, specific grades. Polystyrene. And two forms, HIPs, high impact polystyrene, or pots, tubs and trays. That's your yogurt pots, which is polystyrene. It's also the same stuff as expanded polystyrene, styrofoam. It's the same material, but one's just expanded. Really expensive and really good at doing what it's doing. It's really good insulating. One of the problems, especially with expanded, is how much you get in it. I've done some work previously. It's like a 40-foot Arctic is less than a ton, stuffed to the gunnels full of expanded polystyrene because there's nothing in. So your transport costs are huge. Yet that plant there is Rennie's across in Cumbernauld, one of the biggest polystyrene recyclers. What they basically do is they compress it. They squeeze all the air out of it. And you've got a really dense block then, so you can ship it. And it's really valuable stuff because it's quite an expensive material. Scotland, all the fishing industry, fish boxes, all polystyrene, great for recycling, goes in there. Can be a bit smelly sometimes, but it's really good, and it's reprocessed and goes back to it. And this is the whole purpose of these slides. Everything else. All the bioplastics, all of the ABS, your polycarbonates, your Lego, your electronic equipment, glasses, nylons, your fishing lines, all your other plastics is in this pile. How do you separate that? It doesn't have a little category for itself. is there enough demand for it? Especially some of the engineering plastics, there's just not commercial. There's a huge difference in something being able to be recycled and something actually being recycled. And it's got to be worth their while. You have to mention waste hierarchy. Prevention is key. If you can stop something being done, it's massive savings in things. But food waste. A ton of food waste in a landfill produces half a ton of CO2. Preventing 1 ton of food waste saves 3.5 tons of CO2. So it's massive difference. You can stop the stuff being done. It's great. Reusing it, great. Then recycle it. Recovery and disposal right at the bottom of the waste chain. Right. How do you process plastic? Basically you melt it, you mix it together and you squeeze it out the other side. Really simplistic, but that's what you actually do. So if you can't melt it all at the same temperature, you can't mix it, so you can't then squeeze it out. So in order to recycle something, it has to be compatible in terms of the melt range. When you're actually squeezing it out, you need it to be as runny as the other bit next to it, because if it's too runny, you pour it into a box, it won't stick to the sides, it will just flop down, or one bit will stay up, the other bit will fall down. So it needs to be the same sort of consistency, the same sort of melt flow rate, and that's how it is. And unless it's similar, there's no chance of actually recycling it. You just can't put it together. Normally, recycling industry, plastic industry, chop it into little bits. We've all seen these pellets or nurdles. That's how they tend to be processed. And you put these little coloured things into the hopper, you melt it, you squeeze it out, and it produces things at the other side. Very simplistic. We now start to talk about plastic recycling. You've got to differentiate what people are actually trying to do and how you differentiate mechanical recycling, advanced recycling, and degradation. It's all recycling as such officially, but they're very, very different. Believe it or not, the bulk of recycling at first stage is actually done using the Mark I human eyeball. If it looks like a bottle, it's a bottle. If it looks like a Coke bottle, it's a Coke bottle. And prices reflect. You see the difference between clear PET, coloured PET, and mixed bottles. Massive difference in price. And when you're talking big numbers, that's what you think. And the ones above it are grades, but they're standard grades. The residual waste will go through this technology. This is this guy one up. He's got this big machine. So there's really 3 types of machines. Most of the time it's IR, infrared. We've had the things like black plastic can't be recycled. Well, it can. But infrared detectors don't particularly see black very well. Newer ones are getting better. So if it's black, it's more difficult to recycle. It doesn't mean it can't be recycled, it's just harder to recycle. Density. Our own impact recycling, you basically chuck it in a bucket of water. If it floats at polyethylene or polypropylene, we can then separate that out differentially. So you can actually recycle material very accurately. Boss is actually doing up to 98% purity, which is pretty good, literally by throwing things in a bucket of water and shaking it a wee bit. You can also do it electrostatically by having different charges on the material, so you can separate it that way. But by far, it's done by infrared. That's how they're separating. There's other ones coming along actually. These first three will only work on once you've cut it up into wee bits. It won't work in things. There is other ones coming out which have shape, so it sees a milk bottle. So instead of the Mark 1 human eyeball and a big hand, it actually does it all itself. It'll actually do it. So they are actually starting being developed, and they're actually starting to be introduced. I think that's one John might actually talk about. Advanced recycling. This is the buzzword. Advanced or chemical or anything else. This is a new buzzword. It's actually not a single process, it's a number of different processes, and I'm not going to dwell on it because it's too late. Basically, chemical recycling is the old scale plastic to diesel. What is plastic? It's a bit of dinosaur, a bit of plant, a bit of there, it's been there, so it's actually oil, and they've just purified it and put it there. So there's a lot of rationale to actually put it back into diesel. BP in the 80s actually had a plant producing a naphtha. Sorry, I'm going technical again. They actually had a plant making one of the feedstocks for the plant to make into more plastic, and that was in the 1980s. And they actually had it running, so it's not new. The big game changer is it can scale it. Scale is so important when you actually, I'll come on to scale later on, but you'll see the scale of the recycling versus the virgin, and that's the difference. I'm not going to dwell on this. Basically, you break things down into the intermediate, you make it back into plastic. Other ways, dissolution. Revented one of my companies, declaring an interest. I think it's a better way to do it, but that's just because it's there. Basically, what you're doing is you're removing the impurities. So you put in a purish stream of polypropylene or a purish stream of polyethylene. It will extract all the impurities and it will produce a food grade material that can come out the other side. It's just a far more cost effective way of doing it and a far lower thing. Degradation. When I mean degradation, it's essentially compostable. But what do you actually mean by compostable? There's two very different standards, home compostable and industrial compostable. Home compostable is when you stick it in your garden and it will just break down and make something that the plants can actually use. Industrial is very, very, very different. It's done at high temperature, high pressure, normally in a vat, and they actually process it that way. So all of their compostable packaging, we just go down. What bin do we put it in? Do we put it in the brown bin for the thing? Well, it'll just be rejected. Almost certainly it'll just be rejected and it'll just go from energy to waste. You honestly can't make a lot of this stuff up. It just is. Doesn't work things like VeggieWare. PLA again, polylactic acid, cornstarch. What they've done, they've got a really good model where they produce this stuff and they've got a take-back scheme. So if you go into an arena, it's all VeggieWare material. They come and collect the material, they then compost it. Works great. Perfect, not a problem, but it has to be closed loop. What happens if you take it out of the environment, you put it into your bin at home, it's contaminating the waste stream. Doesn't need to be biomaterial. NHS done one using polyprop. They changed their standard paper cups and their expanded polystyrene cups. They put in expanded polypropylene cups, and they charged people an extra 10p a cup if they didn't bring a reusable cup in. Went from 1% to up to 43%. Which is pretty impressive. That trial was started just before COVID. COVID killed it, but it's still coming back, and it wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't reoccur. When we talk about degradation, you've got to understand where it's going. You can compost it, your AD plant, your industrial composter, then you can put it in the land, the landfill, marine sewer. If you put the wrong material into the wrong stuff, no matter how much you buy it, it'll just sit there. It will just stay. It will not decompose. That paper is after 19 years in a landfill. In Sydney, so it'll be warm. Won't decompose, there's no oxygen there. Nothing will happen to it, it'll just sit there. It's still actually readable. I understand why the guy made polythene bags, plastic bags. Toilet roll, 22 billion kilometres. Right away, that's crazy. That's no wonder there was a shortage during COVID. It's stunning when you do. Even like the demand for paper expected to double. It's crazy. Give you a laugh. The ones in green are the standards that my lab can do. The ones in yellow are the ones we're working on, and we've been at this for 6 years, trying to get them all. It's hard work, really hard work. You put the wrong stuff, the wrong thing, it works, doesn't. The labelling's either worse. How is anybody meant to understand the difference between home composting, industrial composting, bio-based, marine and soil for labelling? You put the wrong thing into the wrong bit, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to sit there. And then you have the word bio. I hate it. I absolutely hate the word bio. If it's a bio, it can be PLA, which is most common from cornstarch, or P from sugarcane. You can get PET, you can get vast majority of different things. We're actually growing enzymes and spirulina in the lab and making plastic just now ourselves in Livingston. We're actually making our own plastic in little dishes, mind you, and we correctly dispose of it, by the way. It's lots of different ways. And then biodegradable or compostable, they're not the same. They genuinely are not the same, but they're intermingled to actually try and to actually understand what they're doing. But trying to actually educate the public and the brands, they all want everything to be biodegradable, they all want something to be compostable. What a laugh, there's no actual standard for home composting. When you actually look at home composting, there's no standard because there's no single way that people home compost. People tend to use a modification of the industrial one at a lower temperature, but there's no standard. Scale is key. You look at the big polyethylene plants. They're building plants that will produce 2 million tonnes a year of polyethylene. Ineos in Grangemouth is tiny by world scale, absolutely tiny. It's really small. These plants are huge, but that's what it produces. The market volume of polyethylene is 107 million tonnes a year. Impact recycling, that's 6,000 tonnes a year. That's a decent sized plant actually. It's a decent sized plant, but it does 6,000 tonnes. This is this plastic fish in the ocean, and 88 to 95% of plastic in the ocean comes from just 10 rivers. The Yangtze River in China puts as much plastic into the ocean each year as Ineos Grangemouth produces. It's quite sobering. Right? Biodegradable plastics. All this fuss that everybody's making about biodegradable plastics. Slightly over 1.5 megatons. It's nothing. It's tiny compared to the others. And that is essentially 64% of it, so it's very, very small bit. Summarise. That's probably not all that green is not necessarily good. Yeah, unintended consequence, greenwashing. Said where it is. Scale is a key. That's me.
Wow. I told you this plastics recycling thing is not as simple as you might naively think. Yeah. Yeah. Question? Comments?
May I have a question?
Yes.
I should declare an interest at the beginning to say I'm chairman of the advisory board of Plastic Energy. So my comment is a number of your slides show use of recycling of plastics to other bits and pieces. I don't call that recycling, I call that downcycling. You're just creating something else, it's not circular. And so we're not in the European Union, but most of our polymers come from the European Union. 2030 says that 30% of all food contact polyolefins will have to be recycled, properly recycled. And mechanical recycling, you can debate whether you can mechanically recycle and make it food contact.
Well, you can. There's no
I doubt
standards.
it, but some people say you can. So that leads you to chemical recycling. No choice. And one of the things you said there, in one of your slides, you talked about, I think, what I like to say is, there are systems to trace a molecule.
Yes.
So you take the plastic, you chemically recycle it, you produce an oil, an naphtha as you call it, it's a naphtha equivalent, and you can trace that through the cracker, through the polyethylene, into a polymer, into a yogurt pot or whatever. It's their choice whether they use it. And those systems are in place already.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify, because it sounded like you were disagreeing.
No. I declared my own interest in dissolution. Okay, Reventus.
All solutions need to be used to get to the 30%.
Absolutely. Currently, there is no standards to recycle food grade polyolefins. That's part of the problem. When you look at the good successes on food grade, you've got PET and you've got milk bottles. Really, apart from them, there's no mechanical recycling, putting a polyolefin back into another food grade. Because would you actually want to with the things? So there needs to be other ways. And I agree with you. I think there's different ways of doing it. Chemical recycling, I have declared an interest in this, what should we call it, Reventus. But chemical recycling is one of the ways you're going to be able to do it because of the scale. And one of the biggest things to come out of tonight is scale, in terms of when you look at everything and how we need to change, and we need to change what we're actually doing.
So I worked in the polyester industry for a long time in PTA, the raw material. A world scale plant for a PTA unit, the precursor for polyesters, when I started work was 100,000 tons. Today it's 2.5 million tons for a single plant, single reactor. So the journey has to start now. That we talk about pilot plants, and pilot plants are 4,000, 5,000, whatever. Plastic Energy is building 3 plants currently in Europe, all at 30,000 tons. So the scale will go, and they'll just get bigger and bigger. That's what happens in the chemical industry. So I have no doubt that, whether it's 5 years or 10 years from now, we'll be talking about 200,000 ton plants, 300,000 ton plants. That's the way it always goes.
I agree.
The lady next to the gentleman.
Right, I'll declare an interest. I'm actually married to this.
Yeah.
I guess
I've never met her before.
I would like to say thank you very much, actually, because I think it is really important, whatever the technicalities of plastic, is that we're sharing this story about our Earth resources. Now, I declare another interest. I run an educational website about sustainability and the circular economy for 3 to 18-year-olds, and basically we need to look. When I talk to the children, young people about our earth resources and recycling and the importance of that, I just say to them, look, it's very simple. We have a biosphere. We have earth, land and air. That's it. And then we have all our resources are contained in our biosphere, and we need to take care of those resources. And plastic is often talked, as you were saying about plastic as the devil.
Yeah.
I mean, I am dripping in oil
Absolutely.
sitting here.
Everybody
I'm
hates
wearing a polyester jacket, my scarf's polyester, the
Every-
elastic
everyone
in
in this room
my,
is.
the elastic
Yeah.
in my jumper. But
Yeah.
one of the key
Yeah.
things that we talk to children about is about monomaterial
Mhm.
and having that monomaterial. So that plain plastic, clear plastic bottle that
You know what
doesn't
it is.
jump into an ocean on its own.
Yeah.
It doesn't fall into the sea on its own. It's humans that don't dispose of them properly. Is actually so much better, as you have demonstrated,
Yeah.
when you've talked about Tetra Pak, when you've talked about aluminium cans being dual material. And I think that we need to change our mindsets into looking at our earth resources and where our earth resources come from. I mean, I've got a lot of lovely cotton clothes,
Mhm.
but those cotton clothes are being shipped from Asia in
And the amount
diesel,
of water they're
yeah,
using in the cotton.
a lot of water and a lot of diesel to get that material
Mhm.
to me. And the idea that we're shipping and not manufacturing on our own doorstep, and I think it will come out with when you have bin coming, the idea of the eco park where you're
Mhm.
looking at all your materials, all your resources and keeping them local, and we should be bringing in, you know, hear about green jobs and green careers, green skills. That is where we need to be thinking if we're thinking about the sustainability of our world. So it's very easy for people to pick on plastic,
Mhm.
and I think actually they need to reflect a little bit more. Last point, I could not believe it. I actually had a conversation with somebody very, very senior at Marks and Spencer's about those paper bags that they've got. I mean, what a ridiculous thing. In actual fact, when you look at the life cycle, there are key words that we need to be talking about. Closed loop, cradle to cradle, and life cycles of products. And the life cycle of that paper bag, guarantee majority of those are one use.
Mhm.
And they're covered in ink, which are already contaminated. Whereas the ATP bag, I mean, I've used mine loads and loads and loads of time, the plastic one. So what I'm trying to say is that plastic has its place, and we need to start
Yeah.
dealing with
I-
it. Sorry,
I
I've
think-
gone on a bit there.
No, it's okay. No, I think it's good. I think actually that probably most of the people in this room really get that, understand it. You know, plastics are essential. We can't get rid of them. Yeah, we need to learn how to deal with them and use them, reuse them properly, dispose of them properly.
All
And
our
also-
resources.
Yeah, also right at the very beginning, people like me shouldn't be going into Rohan and buying plastic trousers and plastic jumpers, and you know, we should think about what we buy. Anyway, anyone else got okay, let me see, I'm going to have to make a choice here. I've got three people. I'm going to go with Wall, okay?
Just an observation that when we're talking about distribution of products that people are making,
Why don't you use that just so people can hear you?
when we're talking about the distribution of products that people are making, the challenge is often how to deal with the last mile. It's the delivery vans versus the traditional shop, and how do you get the things from the distribution centre to the consumer? In the opposite direction with the recycling, it's the first mile, or it's the first yard of getting things into the right bin. And there's a tension between that and the scale required in a lot of these processes, because a lot of this has to happen at a local level, and it's difficult to get enough local people together to generate that scale, is it not?
You've got, this is incredibly simplistic. I mean, the amount of simplistic and how much I've cut this down in terms of the detail. There's very different routes for post-consumer and post-industrial plastics. Post-consumer plastics is what everybody in the room will know. And again, it's all about getting the right stuff into the right bin and not rejecting loads. That first mile is really difficult. because getting people to put the right stuff in. Down in the Biff plant, who were using milk bottles and they're producing food grade, so they're recycling milk bottles. One of the big problems they have is if somebody uses a milk bottle to put something else in, and they contain it and then it goes back into the recycling chain. That whole batch of material is rejected because it's online analysis and all, and it comes up as an error. So they reject the whole batch of that material because somebody wished to recycle something. But you can't risk your safety.
Really?
You can't risk it.
Yeah, gee. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a stupid person, I think. My wife might argue otherwise, but I'm not really stupid. But I have to say, I really don't understand what goes in what bin. What about other people here? I mean, who knows? I clearly put the wrong stuff in my plastic recycling bin, and I'm very well intentioned and not stupid. Are we all in the same boat?
Education
I think
of 3 to
before
18-year-olds.
this session, I thought I knew what I was putting in the bin.
You thought you knew? Well, me too. I have to say I suffer from something that you mentioned, that I want to recycle stuff. And so I think I'm doing the right thing by putting stuff in the bin, but clearly, actually, I'm not.
Plastics are actually relatively flexible, but only a limited number of plastics. A lot of it is recycled, and it tends to be the large volume stuff.
Yeah.
When you look at cardboard and paper and contaminated paper, pizza boxes are the key one. Pizza boxes just will not be recycled as into other bits of
Just
paper.
won't be
They're too
recycled.
contaminated. They're too contaminated.
Yes. Ah.
Hello, I want to declare my conflict of interest as well here. I work as part of the waste department in Perthshire Council, and part of my job is doing conference like this, explain what is going every bin. If you require one of these, I am more than happy to do it. But definitely it should not be that difficult. We understand it's quite tricky, and people overthinking a lot of too much what should be or should not be. What I say, don't focus in what the labels say. Go to the websites of the council and check only the items that they are allowed to put in the bin. And if you have doubt, it's better if you put in the general waste bin.
Stop contaminating.
Also, I want to clarify the statistic that you say about 50%. Zero Waste Scotland say 50% of the items are in the wrong bin. Is right, but more than contamination and contaminating the recycling bins is referring to the general waste bin. More than 50% of what is in the recycling bin can be recycling in the other bins. At the moment, since Perthshire Ross have the new bin, the grey bin that go with the cans, plastics and cartons, we are between 15 and 18% contamination. That is a lot better than used to be. And the contamination in the blue bin, that is paper and cardboard, is about 2 to 3%. That is not so bad.
People can understand cardboard. You can understand
Yeah,
paper.
can understand, but the
Yeah.
problem is about the plastic.
Yeah.
I need to say one of the bigger problems as well, plastic, we're talking about a lot of plastic, but I want to refer in about food waste that you mentioned. The bigger problem in the general waste bin is food waste, with about 30% of the bin is food, and the majority of that food is food that could have been eaten if we have stored it properly, or don't throw away when we can read that the label is past the date.
Thank you. Well, we'll have her back to give a talk. Right, Claire, I see you.
Thank you. I've used some of my plastic bags for life for so long, they're practically museum pieces. Paper ones, yeah, you maybe used them a couple of times. Anyway, that wasn't the question. Why in a country the size of Scotland do we not have consistency in recycling?
Oh,
Whole
no.
recycling?
I'm not going to answer that. I could be here all night. Even the same coloured bins across all the councils. How difficult is that? How, it's how difficult.
I am with all of you.
Yeah.
It's completely ridiculous, but it's coming, we need to be back when was introduced the targets. I don't remember exactly the year, but the government put a big fund of money to help local authorities to introduce recycling, but wasn't any clear guidelines there, and every local authority did whatever was right for them. The problem is if we need to change now all the infrastructure, it's a lot of millions. But I agree with all of you, don't make
By the
any
way,
sense.
Scotland is far better than our colleagues south of the border. Much, much better. A lot of them don't even have the recycling bins and things like that. Some of the councils, it's quite amazing.
David.
You mentioned about plastics in the ocean,
Yeah.
coming mostly from a very small number of rivers, including the Yangtze. And my question is really, given that China and some other Asian countries have a very large reservoir of very skilled but low-cost labour, and quite large industries as well, what is the barrier to them recycling more and putting less into their rivers?
It's why are they continuing to use coal-fired power stations? I'll be honest, I don't quite believe these statistics, but everybody are aware of them, and I think it's one of the statistics you take with a pinch of salt, but it's very good to illustrate scale. And if these statistics are correct, and these statistics are that what one river produces as much plastic into the ocean as what India's Grangemouth does, it's scary. And as the scale thing, but it's politics. I keep regarding plastic to pound coins on the street. If there's a value to something, people will pick it up, people will recycle it. DRS schemes, I'm a fan of DRS, I like DRS schemes. Sorry, deposit return schemes. I like them, I think they're really good. Why it doesn't work in China, don't know. When you look at all that bottle, it's all high-grade bottle material, a lot of high-grade bottle. Why don't they bail that up and ship it and do it? And I think some of it is infrastructure, some of it is just that. And I think a lot of the problem is the landfills, and certainly they don't seem to capture the material as effectively. Once the material is in the ocean, it's too late. It needs to be captured before it gets to the ocean, and captured in the river or captured in the landfill. It's in the ocean, it's there, you're never going to remove it. People are dredging it, it's thousands of pounds a ton, and it's junk they're delivering, you're throwing money away. That doesn't work, you need to do it beforehand. You could actually have a whole presentation about that sort of subject.
Yes.
Okay, I can shout.
You can shut up and shout then.
Scottish Deposit Return Scheme,
Mm-hmm.
heavily criticised,
Yeah.
demonised in the popular
Yeah.
press, ultimately dropped.
Yeah.
Why?
Politics.
No, but
Glass.
am I correct in thinking that the Bête Noire were the manufacturers?
No, it was eventually dropped because UK government put in the Single Market Act. That's why it was eventually dropped, and that's why it couldn't go ahead. In terms of people who are opposed to it, I don't think glass should be included personally, but it didn't make any difference to me. As plastic people seemed relatively happy at going into the DRS because it would actually get a good output. So I sat back, didn't have much involvement after that. Once everybody was happy, fine. But it was stopped it wasn't a surprise to anybody. The manufacturers, they weren't surprised it was coming in, knew about it for ages. If they didn't act to it, their problem. But the reason it was stopped was government Westminster.
So just a supplementary comment. For me, one of the most easily understood slides was the DRS schemes in other
Yeah.
countries, mainly in Europe, not exclusively.
Yeah.
And the recycling rates were phenomenal.
Mm.
And there's nothing to suggest that Scotland couldn't have achieved the upper quartile of these results very quickly.
Scotland is actually really good position for recycling. I did, I've got to be careful. I've done peer reviews. I'm trying to be careful. All of the, in terms of the population in Scotland, is all in the Central Belt. Yes, you have people up in Inverness, but it's relatively small. Let's be honest. So all the population is within about 80 miles from any sort of centre. So you put a big plant in, say, Falkirk or Stirling or somewhere like that, where it can collect the material from the bulk of the population, it actually makes a lot of sense, Scotland, because it is so small in terms of where the population is. But the population in Scotland is quite small. For large bottle-to-bottle recycler making bottles and turning it back into bottles, you would need virtually all of the plastic bottles that are produced in the Central Belt.
Just for clarity, on this deposit return scheme, I was involved in that as well. When it says plastics recycling, it's purely PET bottles.
Yes.
That's the first thing to say. And as you've said already, I completely agree, it's extremely valuable material. The project I was involved was to build a recycling plant in Levensea, which is, between Glasgow and Edinburgh. We were ready to build it. That was for the PET part. Levensea was going to deal with the aluminium cans, and they were going to deal with the glass. And it was ready to go. And it was it was just absolute nonsense. It was cancelled.
It was politics.
It was infuriating. It made so much sense. And yet you're right with those statistics. You go to Norway, Sweden, Zero Waste Scotland, went to Iceland and Norway and all these places and saw how it worked. And that 90% recycling was possible. It was not a pipe dream or anything like that. It's been proven in so many places. And then it was the rug was pulled from us.
Yeah.
Investment was there, designs were there, everything was ready to go.
So agree totally. Scotland has a lot of advantages because it's small and it's dense. It would have worked really well. It would have changed attitudes.
I've just picked up the figures from Ireland. Ireland launched their DRS scheme on the 1st of February this year, and within up to today, they've been recycling 77% of their plastic since they started the DRS, and are actually saying that economically, it's very profitable, and so pollution-wise, resource-wise, it's just mad.
It's a brain dead situation. She really should have went ahead. Absolutely brain dead.
I mean, just on an anecdotal thing, we went to the rugby last weekend, and they are selling the beer in these reusable cups that have got a deposit on them.
Yeah.
There were kids of about 14, 15-year-olds scurrying up these seats where they've been strewn on the floor, collecting piles of them off to get their deposit back. So just on an anecdotal...
Pound and coin. If something has a value, something will collect it.
Yeah. Yes. Have a microphone.
I was a bit worried about what you were showing in terms of the solutions people are coming out with. And the greenwashing, if you like, in terms of the Frankenstein type materials, the mixed materials. Do you think there's any way that can be turned about, legislated against, whatever, to because it's mad, isn't it, that we're just like replacing one thing with something which is even worse?
Yeah.
I think that was a good question. That really boils down to, should there be a law against lying?
Yeah.
That would be a good one, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It's the whole purpose of time is unintended consequences. a lot of the driver for recycling is PRNs. And that's what's driven the recycle market for so many years. And the plastic packaging tax was meant to drive recycling. No, it's a nice little earner for the government now, and they're making 20% more than expected. It's wrong. Remember, I'm a lab, so I'm used to taking information and putting it back, so I'm used to analysing it. So sorry if I'm not a pure plastic person. It's what we do. We take claims and we dissect them and we put them back. And hopefully it's a relatively balanced presentation and actually try to understand.
Well, we're going to get kicked out of here soon. Claire, are you going to say thank you? By the way, was that, I think it's a good, an interesting topic to talk about. And we've got two more coming up, two different parts of the process. So get your tickets and get your questions looked at, and we'll make sure that this young lady comes back to answer for the council.
I am in the back if you want to answer anything.
I don't know about anybody else, but I think I learned quite a lot tonight. And I also feel completely justified now in being confused as to what goes in which bin. It would be really nice if we had some more councillors here maybe who could deal with this, so maybe we'll invite them along to the other two talks. See if we can exert some influence on getting a bit more consistency. But thank you, Kevin. That was a really interesting talk through a whole load of things that I hadn't even thought about. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for such an informative and interesting evening. Thank you.